Be the arrow. Be the arrow. Be... Oh! What the? Be the human! Be the human! Aloha, and welcome to this week's video. So this week was really exciting. I actually filmed it about 2 weeks ago, but finally getting around to put it in this week. So I received these arrowheads by Dave Tenbears. So these are obsidian and stone arrowheads that he napped himself. They were beautifully made. I was very excited to get them. He sent me a couple extras, which I was happy with. But he sent them to me for the purpose of testing. So if you've watched my channel, you'll have seen, I think it was a few weeks ago, I tested some shark tooth arrowheads that were my design. More out of just curiosity to see, how well they would work, and they actually worked really well. And after watching that, he was curious to see how they would compare to some, Native American style arrowheads. And so he sent me these. I'm going to be using the same kind of method that I put in my other arrowhead, the shark teeth arrowheads with. All I'm doing here is I'm just fitting a groove for the arrowheads, and then I'm going to be lashing it and then gluing it with some super glue. As I was lashing it, I totally did not have my camera angle correct, and so unfortunately you're not going to see most of the lashing. You can see there I just went ahead and skipped just because I was lashing off camera. It was my mistake. But what I did there is after I got done just tying it into place, lashing it around, I just tied in a simple knot and then kind of glued the whole thing together. The super glue itself definitely wouldn't hold this, but it does act as a really good binding for the lashing that I put on there. It worked really well for the shark teeth arrowheads, and so I'm pretty confident it's going to work well here too. I was a little bit nervous though, because the grooves that I'm lashing around have an edge, and so I was kind of worried that they might cut through the lashing, but that's also where the glue will help, just because the glue will add more points of contact, and so it'll distribute energy to more areas rather than just where the lashing is holding. And so the process that I did is the same on all these. I just used my handsaw here to cut a groove, and then I sanded that open wide enough to fit the arrowheads. They did have a notch in the center, a vertical notch, and so I made sure and sanded the edges down so that the arrowhead would fit right in, or the shaft of the arrow would fit right inside of that notch on the arrowhead, just so that there's just more points of contact. That way, when the arrow hits, it's going to have less strain on the lashing, and more energy is going to be transferred from the arrow to the arrowhead and into the piece. At least that's my thinking on it. So I ended up making a total of 4 arrows. I have 2 obsidian arrows and then 2 stone. And then I had 3 shark tooth arrows, and I ended up making a 4th one. I had broken one previously, and so I had to make another one, and I went with a slightly different design, and that design worked out really well. I was actually very pleased with it, and you'll see that here in just a little bit. I did get a little bit more of the lashing process here. That last step, I just tied in a simple knot and then cut off the tails and wrapped them around and then glued them. Kind of what you would do if you were lashing like a traditional piece, except for rather than super glue, you'd use pitch or something along those lines. I don't have access to any of that, and so I kind of figured I would just do them similar. The knot that I'm using for the lash is, I think it's called a slip knot, but it's the same type of knot that you'd use for fishing. It just works really well for securing that and pulling it through. And so I went ahead and used that as the primary knot, and then I also ended up just doing a couple wraps around the arrowhead shaft before I would glue it into place. All of these arrowheads have a similar design, just some are a little bit wider than others. Some have a little bit more of a tail that flays out. And so I try to pick the 4 that would have the most unique shapes, although they're all fairly consistent. He did an absolutely amazing job. So here's the first set of arrows. I ended up making, as I'd mentioned, one more shark tooth arrow. There's only 3 here. of the obsidian and stone arrowheads, I have 4. And this one right here, absolutely beautiful. So it's kind of like the obsidian had a black and brown contrast. So it's like a 2-tone obsidian. Beautiful. I loved it. So here's this 4th arrowhead that I made. This style here. This was actually a recommendation from my brother-in-law, who's a hunter. He had seen the arrows and he liked them, and he had recommended that. So it's similar to this design here, where it's a multi-blade, but less resistance. And so the idea is that it might have a good cutting profile and still go really deep into the ballistics gel. So let's get out and have some fun. So I was really excited for this and super nervous because I just knew I was gonna break something, because I'm not an archer. This is kind of the extent of my archery. My target that I'm shooting, I started at about 27 feet away. I know I'm about 27 feet because my workshop is 21 feet, and there was about 3-4 feet after the workshop where the target was, and then me. So here's a couple practice shots. After this first practice shot, I thought I was doing great, and so I just started. So this is the arrowhead, and it actually did really well. So you can see there how it shot in a good 5 inches. So this block is 6 inches deep, and so you've got good 5 inches of penetration there, and that was awesome. So now I'm going to go ahead and practice with the bull shark arrowhead. Just a single shot, same that I did before. I ended up missing on this one. I just got a little bit too fast. Didn't take my time. But it was kind of good to see how it was going to react with this. So the backing that I put up here is my ballistics gel in front of some thicker foam, dense foam, and then wood shavings, and then dense foam behind it. Pretty much the whole goal is to get it. I want to stop the arrow before it hits the brick, because if it hits the brick, it's going to break. So it took a couple of times to kind of get used to it. I ended up moving forward just a little bit, just because I kept going left to right. I have a tendency to shoot to the left, so I just got to dial in my aim, and then I finally got a good square hit on the ballistics gel. So this single tooth arrowhead has always been the best arrowhead when it comes to how far into the ballistics gel it goes. So this actually penetrated all the way through, which is insane. You can't really see there because my crappy camera work. The GoPro stuck to my head. But this actually went all the way through. Now, it didn't go into really the foam. It kind of just barely poked out the other side. But still, it went 6 inches into the ballistics gel. So that would be pretty intense. So here's the final setup. So I have a rack of ribs here in the front. It's just a cheap rack of ribs. Got the cheapest one I could find. And I put that in front of the ballistics gel, holding it in place. And then I'm using my sock. I cut up a sock for a wrist guard. It's okay. I don't spend too much time doing this. Otherwise, I'd maybe go get some actual stuff. But I just was having fun. So I hit the rack of ribs and completely missed the ballistics gel. I went too high, and so it stabbed right through it, and it hit the brick wall. What's crazy is that right there, that's the tooth. So it didn't shatter in the brick wall. It literally stuck into the brick and then broke off. So I have a piece of tooth stuck in my brick, which is hilarious. Kind of disappointing. I ended up breaking this one. I couldn't test anymore with it.
See how this does.
So now I'm going to be testing with the first piece here. So I totally missed, which was unfortunate. And I was a little bit nervous pulling that out, that I was going to break the stone, because this was the stone arrowheads. But it held up just fine. I was actually very impressed how well it worked. I don't know. I feel like I was getting worse. I was finally able to dial it in. What I ended up doing was just scooting up a little bit closer to the target. I do like shooting farther away. It's a little bit more fun, but I'm not consistent enough to shoot from that distance. So I scooted up to about 20 feet away, maybe a little bit under. And I got a good solid hit. Now this surprised me. So again, I hit it and it didn't go very deep. And I was like, man, why didn't that go very deep? It should have went all the way through, just like the arrowhead. This struck bone, a thick piece of bone. That right there, that entire piece is bone. This went through about 1 inch of solid bone, which is insane. What also surprised me is that I totally expected it to be broken. So when I pulled it out, nothing. It looked like it chipped maybe the tip a tiny bit, but it pierced right into that bone, almost went through it just fine.
Perfect.
So this one was the first shark tooth that I tried. Or I'm sorry, not the shark tooth. This was I shot a second time with that one just because that other one really wasn't good. Went into the bone, and this went pretty good. So one thing that I noticed as I was shooting with the arrowheads is they would kind of skid off the bone. It wouldn't really slice the bone, which really isn't a problem. I mean, if you're wanting to shoot an arrow, you definitely don't want to get hung up on ribs or bone. It did hit the bone a little bit, but not really. It kind of just skirted in between the ribs. And it went about 5 inches, maybe 4.5. One thing that I started doing right after this, and I kind of got the idea as I was holding it in my hand, was I was like, you know what? I need to mark these. You can kind of see on that arrowhead, it kind of broke just the corner. And so what I decided to do is I was going to go ahead and mark how deep each one of these arrows goes, because I just want to keep track of how well they're doing on average without having to memorize it. So I went and got a marker. Unfortunately, I had already pulled this one out, and so I kind of just guesstimated as to where it went. I think I was about close. It was about 4.5, 5 inches into the ballistics gel, plus the inch of the ribs. So that's a pretty decent guesstimate. All right, let's try my newest one. So this is the new style arrowhead, and I was really excited to try this one. Totally missed the first time. I had to take a second shot. That was perfect. So I did. I just skirted around some ribs there, but I did make it into the ballistics gel, which was perfect. This one went in pretty deep, so this was still a good 4.5 inches deep, maybe 5 plus the ribs that it went through. Now it mostly missed the ribs. I was a little bit nervous as how I was going to pull out. I ended up needing to match it to the cut. One of the things that I noticed that was kind of interesting is, especially the shark tooth arrowheads would kind of twist once they got in. And so as I started to pull them out, they didn't line up with the wounds. And so it's kind of a little bit of a back and forth. But that one did beautifully. I was very, very pleased with how that one did. So now I'm going to try the first obsidian blade, or obsidian tip, and see how this one goes. So this one was also a perfect hit. A little bit to the left, but into the ballistics gel. So that one went about 5 inches, maybe a little bit more, plus the ribs. So that was a good solid hit. It did cut a little bit of rib, but mostly just kind of bounced off the rib and redirected, which is kind of the pattern, like I mentioned, I saw on all of the arrowheads. They would kind of just snake around the ribs, with the exception of that first one that just hit perfect and stabbed right into bone. I still can't believe it did that. That just was very surprising. So now I'm going to be using this arrowhead. Now this arrowhead, last time I tested with it, was a pain. And the worst flight pattern. So you can see there, I aimed really far to the right because I knew it was going to go left, and it was perfect. I hit it dead center. What was crazy, completely unexpected, and you'll see this here in just a second. So as I pulled it out, it didn't really go deep into the ballistic gel. It kind of surprised me, and you can kind of see the two shark teeth on the side there, the edges, and then just the tip of the shark teeth that went into the ballistics gel. What it did though, and you can see from the angle of this cut, is it sliced ribs. So this hit 2 ribs, one on either side of the arrow shaft, and it completely sliced them. And it severed 2 ribs, which was insane. So it's really hard to see from here. You'll see it at the end. I kind of look at it from the backside, but you can see 1 rib right there that's been just severed, and then there's another second rib underneath that's been severed. So this arrowhead severed 2 ribs perfectly, just cleanly, right through them, and still had enough energy to go about 1 inch into the ballistics gel. So this would definitely cause some damage. And what was crazy is that it didn't break. The bull shark teeth, those are bull shark teeth. The bull shark teeth, man, those things are impressive. Absolutely gnarly. So here's the next arrowhead. And the arrowheads kind of all reacted the same. This was a really good hit a little bit higher, which is kind of where I was aiming, almost dead center. This one, just like the other ones, went in about 5 inches into the ballistics gel, maybe 4.5 to 5 inches, and then obviously about 1 inch through the rack of ribs. So the reason why I was aiming the way that I was going for the rack of ribs is kind of the idea that you hit center mass on a target, whether it's in battle or you're hunting, you're hitting center mass, and so how it's going to react, hitting the rib cage, and the consistency of the arrowheads was just gnarly. So here's that 4-pronged one. This one actually has a very stable flight pattern, and I think it's because of the weight distribution. So it's pretty easy to hit the target with this one. Like the wide one, it doesn't go very deep. It did go in about 1.5 inches, maybe 1 3/4 inches. But the cut, the damage that it leaves is pretty intense. It did break though. So this was the first arrowhead that I broke on target. I broke the other one, but that's because I hit a brick wall. So this one broke on target. In fact, it even left shrapnel. You can see right there, I noticed as I was pulling it out, a piece of tooth that had broken off. I don't know when that broke off, but it definitely broke off sometime on impact. And so you can see it broke off the two of these sections and part of the top arrow tooth. Now these teeth here are tiger shark. The top tooth is a bull shark. The 4 side teeth are tiger shark teeth. I've noticed that the tiger shark teeth tend to be a little bit more brittle than the bull sharks. I'm not entirely sure why. I've just noticed that, especially when you hit them on that back edge there versus the front edge where it curves in like a hook. But for whatever reason, they are a little bit more brittle. So here's the last obsidian arrow that I'm going to be testing with. And it performed pretty much exactly as expected. I really love the 2-tone on that, a black and dark brown 2-tone on that arrowhead. Definitely my favorite arrowhead. I did miss with that one just a little bit, but wasn't bad. I just needed to take a second shot. I do tend to shoot a little bit to the left, and I don't know if it's because of how I'm pulling back or how I'm drawing. I'm not an archer, so I'm kind of just winging it. But I did get a good hit on it. Nice center mass. This one did cut a little bit of rib, but it didn't. None of them severed the ribs like that second one. The second one was just gnarly, but none of the arrowheads took any significant damage. Like they would all be reusable. The only arrow that took significant damage on the target was the tiger shark one, but wasn't a big issue at all. I did end up shooting that tiger shark one more time. It was already damaged. I kind of just wanted to hit it again and see what it would do. More or less just having fun with it. Figured if I was going to shoot one more time, I might as well shoot one that's already broken. I thought about shooting it to a harder target and doing like a toughness comparison. So my tree is a mesquite tree, but it's so unbelievably dense. It'd shatter anything. So I did get it right on target, which was nice. And it did have decent penetration into the ballistics gel. It didn't go as far as I expected it to. It only went in about 2 inches. But that's because when I pulled it out, I realized I had demolished it. This one is done. All 4 tiger shark teeth on the sides had been completely torn out or broken. Now this piece would definitely hurt because of its shrapnel, but yeah, it was toast. So here's my final inspection on the ribs. You can't really see it from this front side, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this out and flip it around, and then we're going to inspect it from the other side. You actually get a lot clearer picture from the other side. So I'm just going to rip off some of this plastic. Need to wash my hands after this. But we'll get a lot clearer picture. You can actually see the wounds very clear from the other side of this. So there's that really deep cut. So that was from that second one that severed 2 ribs. And then you can see this right here. That was from that new one that I had that has the cross section. It cut beautifully. And then each one of those flat cut lines are from various pieces. Most of them from the obsidian because they just all went straight through. All right. So all of these performed about the same. The arrowheads. This one had the best penetration, but I think this one went the deepest into the ballistics gel just because it missed ribs. One of these stabbed, I think it was this one, stabbed into bone, just a straight solid piece of bone, and it didn't break. That was awesome. That was super awesome. But pretty much all of them performed about the same with regards to about how far in they went. One thing I noticed too is they were all pretty easy to pull back out. None of them were really that bad. This one probably would have done the same as these. I did do a test on this one first in the ballistics before it hit. I tried the bone, but when I shot this one at the ribs, I kind of missed. I hit the meat. You saw the video, but I ended up launching it into my brick wall, and it actually stabbed into the brick wall. There's a chunk of tooth left in the brick wall, but yeah, so I couldn't really test that any further. This one surprised me. This one didn't go very deep, but it hit ribs like this and severed the ribs. Like, thick ribs, severed them completely and still went this deep. So I think this much of it was in the ballistics gel, and this was like in between the ribs and the ballistics gel, so it still penetrated about that deep, but severed 2 thick ribs. Like, that was insane, especially since it didn't break these at all. Like, that was gnarly. This one, I think overall performed the best. I would say this design was the best. You can see that how deep it went into the ballistics through the ribs is about the same as these. So these had really good penetration. This went the same, but it cut with a cross section, and so it just left a deeper, wider wound, and it also made it a lot harder to pull out. So this piece didn't pull out very easy. It cut in very well, and it actually held really solid. This worked really well. This piece got demolished. So this is tiger shark teeth. The tiger shark teeth definitely don't handle the impact coming along this part of the edge. They're definitely a lot more robust cutting the other direction. This was still pretty intense. It did a lot of damage. Broke these two off first, and then I shot it again because it just had these two, so it was a similar profile as this. And it kind of just broke it all apart. You can see this top one up here is almost completely broken off, barely holding on. I think it's just the glue now that's holding it. Now there's a little bit of lashing still in place, but not much. So this one just got completely demolished. And then this probably would have done way better, but you know, I shot it into a brick wall. So what's interesting, the arrowheads were a lot more robust than I was expecting them to be. They completely, like the one that stabbed into the bone and just like chilled there, like that was crazy. I can't believe it did that. That was insane. But I think the shark teeth, the bull shark teeth, actually make better arrowheads. This is why. They have the same, I would say, potential. So you get, for example, this piece here that went in about this deep. This one here that went all the way through the ballistics gel. You know, when they have a similar cutting profile, so this looks like a larger arrowhead, but when you look at the cutting profile, it's about the same. You just have a larger taper here than on here, but your cutting profile is about the same. So we have the same cutting profile, we get the same depth, but if you had access to teeth, I mean, you could make, you're pretty much done. You just drill holes in the root right here, not through the enamel, but through the root is what I did. And you lash it and you're done. So you can get significantly faster. You can build these way faster than you can these. Unfortunately, there's no sharks, you know, in the middle of the North American continent. That's probably why they didn't have them. But I think for speed, I think these win. These were also extremely robust. I'm actually very surprised. I expected this one to break. I didn't expect this one to break, but that's because, you know, I also didn't expect to hit the brick wall with it. I was kind of expecting these to break if I hit ribs, and they didn't, and that surprised me. But neither did any of these. The only ones that broke were this one. But the tiger shark teeth have just not been as good against the bone as the bull shark teeth, I've noticed. But all in all, that was pretty intense. These definitely, I think, are better for like a battle scenario. The amount of damage this creates is just massive. A gaping wound, slicing arteries, slicing bone, leaving shrapnel. These definitely, I think, have the biggest potential for damage, as well as just incapacitating. I think if you were hunting, you'd probably want something like this, or, you know, obviously these. But all in all, it was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for the arrowheads. These were made by Dave Tenbears, and I'll leave his YouTube in the description below. If you liked the video, go ahead and leave it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Mahalo plenty for everyone that's joined, and see you later. Aloha.